Sorry about that.
All right. Yeah. And Councillor Ladwig with us. And the participants are pouring in. Yeah. Okay, welcome. So by my clock, I have 3 o'clock, and are we ready to go? Corporate officer, acting corporate officer?
We are ready to go. We are live on YouTube.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Committee of the Whole for May 3, 2022, being held once again electronically, and honored to gather on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Councillor D'Andrade is not with us this afternoon for this meeting. She will be with us later this evening. Call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock and ask firstly for approval of the agenda. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Ladwig, all in favor? Thank you very much. And ask also for motion to receive all of the reports on the agenda today. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Ladwig again, all in favor, and thank you very much. So the first item we have this afternoon is a report from Kirsten Defoe, our planner, regarding the development variance permit application at lot 47 Shoal Lookout to increase building height by 2.3 meters for a new single family dwelling with a secondary suite. Kirsten, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. I will go ahead and share my screen. So the application to be discussed today, as was just stated, is for a development variance permit to increase the maximum permitted height in the R1 zone for the construction of a single family dwelling with a secondary suite on a currently vacant lot. The purpose of the report in this presentation is to obtain direction from committee to council on whether to proceed with the application and notify neighbors of the variance request. The subject property outlined here in blue is located on the east side of Shoal Lookout and extends eastwards to the water. While this aerial image does indicate the site to be largely vegetated, much of that area actually has already been cleared for site preparation work and for geotechnical investigation. The western side of the property falls at a moderate slope from Shoal Lookout over various bedrock features before becoming steeper to fall to the shore as a cliff on the east side of the property. Property is currently vacant, as mentioned, and is surrounded by a low-density residential neighborhood. The application site does not have an address at this time, as it's a vacant lot, so the applicants will need to request one from the Sunshine Coast Regional District. Because it doesn't have an address, the report refers to the property as lot 47 Shoal Lookout. The proposal is for a single family home to incorporate a secondary suite in the lower level, and it will be lifted above the sloping site on structural supports. An open carport structure with storage below will be a separate structure, and is such, it will be subject to different height requirements. So you'll notice those in some of the elevation drawings, that it appears to be similar height to the building, but it does have different requirements and it is not apparently infringing upon it. The proposed footprint is outside of the 15 meter flood setback requirement for a seaside property. The dashed line that you may be able to see here on the site plan indicates where that is, so it does come quite close, but it does not go into that area. It is also outside of those eastern portions of the site. In this case, the east is the lower part of the map, that are subject to development permit areas 1 and 2. That's for geotechnical hazards and environmental sensitivity. So it is outside of those areas. These are two of the renderings provided with the application to provide somewhat of an understanding of the appearance of the development from Shoal Lookout, so from the street, as well as from the east, which is not really a vantage point for someone standing. However, it sort of gives a feel for what the site will look like and developed from that direction. So it is a two-story design with ceiling heights for the main story heights at 10 feet, increasing to approximately 15 feet over the entry and living room, which is this popped up area that you can see on the two elevations. So while this site's topography does partially block the dwelling from view from Shoal Lookout, due to the zoning bylaw definition of height and the footprint proposed for the building, the dwelling will exceed the 8-meter maximum height. So the variance request to support the construction of the new home, the applicant requests to vary the maximum building height in the R1 zone by 2.3 meters. This is from 8 meters to 10.3. Because the proposed dwelling is flat roof, the highest point of the building does determine the maximum height as proposed. So this elevation shows the proposed home from the south, from the direction of 298 Shoal Lookout. The entrance to the secondary suite can be seen on the lower level from this elevation. So the average grade for the building's footprint is shown in green, while the lower of the two red lines shows the maximum permitted 8-meter height, with the upper the requested 10.3 meter variance. I would note that the chimney is subject to a height exception, so it's not subject to the same height requirements.
Kristen, can I ask you a question there? Go back to the last slide.
Certainly.
On the slide here, I'm looking at one of the elevations in the package, and it shows an angled roof on the carport. I don't see that in this slide because that angled roof almost comes up to the same height elevation as the area that is within the variance request.
That is correct. I actually hadn't noticed that. Other elevations, which you'll see on this on the upcoming slides, do show it as that angled roof.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So from the north elevation, the proposed home as it would be seen from 308 Shoal Lookout. As described on page 4 of the staff report, impacts of the requested variance on this address are considered by staff to be significantly negative. Those impacts are particularly due to the views. And this is a photo from the patio of 308. This is sort of the main outdoor living area for that dwelling. Because of the height of the highest point of the roof at that pop-up location over the entry and the living room, the roof level will be 1.7 meters above the level of the deck, which means it's approximately at the average person's eye level for someone standing on this deck. So much of the view to the water and to the islands will be obstructed by the height that's being requested. However, the applicant did note that views to the east of the proposed dwelling will be maintained, as indicated by the yellow lines shown here. So essentially, everything below those yellow lines, which represents an area to the east, the view would be maintained, which essentially is this view of the same patio looking in that direction. This is the west elevation, so it would be the building as would be seen from Shoal Lookout. As you've seen this rendering previously, the site's topography between the street and the proposed dwelling will cause portions of the building to not be visible from the street, while other parts, particularly that open carport and portions of the southern side of the building will extend into that view, as will the pop-up area. I haven't shown average grade on this particular one, the green line that you've seen in the other elevations, because it is actually below the level of what would be seen here. And then looking at the east elevation, again, except for maybe a few views from Keats Island, this wouldn't usually be a view that would be seen, not from neighboring properties or from the road. But again, indicating the structural supports, average grade, 8 meters and the 10.3 that's requested. In considering variances, policy does require that council consider certain criteria. Those criteria are addressed in the report on pages 4 through 6. I would note that 2 of the critical criteria are not met, are considered by staff to not be met. Firstly, that the variance will not result in significant negative impacts on neighboring properties. I've indicated that the impacts on views to the property at 308 and the residents on the deck would be considered significantly negative. Secondly, the criteria that there is a demonstrated need for the variance in order to permit reasonable use of the property. We would say that a single-family dwelling with a secondary suite is a reasonable use of the property. However, there could be potential design changes that would eliminate the need for the height variances. The applicants did present a theoretical, certainly not part of their proposal, but a theoretical 8-meter high building envelope closer to Shoal Lookout, which would not exceed the zoning bylaws definition for max height. Other alternatives could be removing the additional height over the living room and entry, reducing the ceilings, potentially lowering the building and doing more rock breaking or excavation to allow for that. So that criteria is not met. The overall intent of the original bylaw requirement or standard is not compromised. This is considered to be met. The scale and the character of the dispersed residential development on the bluff is generally respected by the proposed dwelling, that the not considering for the height itself, but the fact that it does appear as a 2-story dwelling with a modern architectural style, along with a mix of the modern and traditional architectural styles present on the bluff. And the fact that the intent of height regulations, while having a consequence of helping to protect views in many cases, is not specifically the intent of the maximum height regulations. And then the variance does not appear to establish a precedent for other properties, but responds to site-specific situations or difficulties. And because of the sort of unique nature of properties on the bluff, the irregular topography, exposed bedrock features, it is considered by staff that this wouldn't be specifically causing a precedent for other development. So the application was referred to infrastructure services and building departments at the town, as well as to the Gibsons and District Volunteer Fire Department. All parties identified no concerns for the proposal. So recommendations from the staff report are summarized here. Council may either direct staff to notify neighbors of the DVP application, which is staff's recommendation from the staff report, or alternatively, to not support the DVP application. Should council direct staff to notify neighbors, staff would then report back to council with any decisions received from neighbors prior to the council making the decision to approve or deny the proposal. I've also included that the recommendations as presented in the staff report be forwarded to tonight's council meeting. Thank you. I would note before I turn it back over to you that I do believe that the owner and applicant or developer of the property are in attendance in this meeting today. So thank you, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Kristen. Council, obviously we have a decision to make. I want to speak generally to variances. We get a lot of requests for variances, particularly in the bluff area, because of the nature of the land up there and the topography up there. But it's been my principle that to consider variances where they do not have negative impacts on other properties and viewscapes. And I think that's, I mean, we all recognize the importance of views in the topography of the town of Gibsons and why people come here to enjoy that. So I'm very concerned when I see a variance request that might not necessarily be required other than for architectural reasons to come in where it is going to have negative impact on a neighbor, albeit the things, people take their chances when they build a house. They don't know what's going to happen in that vacant lot next to them. But I think we have to be fair in treating everybody fairly in the process. My view is where I just see the sloping roof of that house to be an of the garage to be an architectural detail. It doesn't, to me, add anything to the garage, yet it is within this new variance height area. So I think two things that we can do, obviously, as presented by staff, is one is simply to decline the variance at this time and move on and invite the proponent to come back with another submission. Maybe a lesser variance, maybe still a variance, but maybe a significant lesser variance, because this one is quite significant. Or move it forward to enable the community to have a comment on it. That is sometimes the best situation, but it's not always the best outcome for neighbors. Especially when people are going to be living together long term, to start off with a negative footing where you've got a number of negative views being expressed by your neighbors, basically relative to the house you're building. We put people in that position. So, with that said, I'm leaning right now to asking the proponents to come back with another proposal that is more in keeping with and there may be an additional variance request, but in terms of not referring it at this point in time. But I'll take comments from other councillors at this time. Councillor Pearl.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And I agree with a lot of what you said. What I would appreciate or have appreciated in a situation like this, with respect to, for example, let's say the photographs that were taken from the property across the street from their deck, would be how would a building built on that site that didn't require a variance impact on the view? And I suspect that there would still be quite an impact on the view with a building that was within the 8-meter allowable envelope. But it is, we do live in peril when we live in view corridors, and and what potentially, as you say, could be built on the lot across the street. But I think it would be useful. I think, because if the people were not asking for a variance, they could have gone ahead and built something without it having to come to council. And the people across the street would have had a building put up that would ostensibly potentially block their view. So I think, it becomes a good neighbor situation. We have another case before us where the people actually canvassed their neighborhood. They showed their neighbors what was going to be built, how it was going to impact. And, it's going to be a difficult situation. And, as you said yourself, if it goes out for public comment, it might just sort of, antagonize everyone in the neighborhood. So those are just my comments for now. But I think it is significant to note that a building that was built within the allowable envelope would have drastically impacted on the view and not required a variance. It would have just happened. So, in one sense, the developer on this property is at least putting it out there saying, the view is going to be blocked. How badly is it going to be blocked? So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, I agreed with you. When I looked at it, I thought, and it's I know it sounds small, like 2.3 doesn't sound as bad as it's literally almost 8 feet, right? So, which is probably the normal height of a floor in any regular construction. So I don't know. Sometimes when I hear variance, I hear like, it's maybe half a foot or, you know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, I have to apply for this because it's just slightly falls outside. But my feeling is that this falls way outside. And like you already articulated, which I thought it's for architectural, like that main piece on top of the house isn't a livable area. It's just a extra high ceiling. So I don't know. Sometimes when you see these things, you think, well, maybe you should come back with a different proposal and not impact the views of your neighbors as much as you did right now. And I do have that was my viewpoint. I think they should come back with a different alternative. I did have a question for Kirsten, the planner. I know there's been some work on the site, and I know there was concern by the neighbors that it was being done without a permit. Is there what's been done there, and is everything? Maybe you could just like inform us on what's been done there so far.
Absolutely. So there's been some clearing of vegetation on the site. There was an issuance of a tree cutting permit for the removal of 6 trees. That was involved with the preparation of the site as well as work to prepare the geotechnical assessment. There has been, as I have seen images of, some substantial rock breaking done without blasting or drilling, just using the excavator that's on site, again in site preparation work. However, it's not work that specifically requires a building permit, and that's where a lot of our triggers for things such as sediment and erosion control would come into effect. So I have told the applicants that when it comes to the building phase of the application, they will have to put appropriate measures in place to protect that area. However, at this point in time, there's no permitting required for the work that's been done on the site, to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Councilor Ludwig?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you said that the height restriction isn't intended, or the main intent is not to protect views. What is the purpose of the height restriction then, if it's not to protect views? What is, I'm just curious about the background on that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. That's a good question. When we're looking at the height or any bulk and massing control, which includes things like setbacks, maximum site coverage, it's really with the intent of maintaining the desired scale and character of the residential neighborhoods. On many residential neighborhoods with the R1 zoning, for example, it's on much more flat oriented sites. Which even a building complying with the height or well below effectively hems in some of its neighbors. We see this in the R1, R2, and R3 zones. So consequence, because of the height and the varied topography on the bluff, is to protect views, as I mentioned, but it wouldn't actually specifically be the intent.
Okay, great, thank you. But this one is in the view protection zone, correct?
It is not in a view protection zone. No, it is not. No.
Okay. And then final question. So just looking at the design, if we don't approve this variance, they will still be able, like, it looks like they would have to go down a bit in their driveway. Like, it would still be a developable site, right? And they would be able to access it from their carport spot. It looks like it'd have to dip down a bit or something, right?
The building would, again, as I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, the carport structure is subject to different height requirements. Right. Our zoning bylaw does permit, I believe it is 3.5 meters from the grade of the adjoining street on sites that are steep like this one. That would be met by the proposed garage, so the carport. So the carport could stay where it was, right. But then the building may potentially move or be dropped to a lower elevation. Right,
they'd have to step down. Right, okay. Well, I too agree with Mayor Beamish. I think that we need to consider people's views behind them. I think it's a respectful thing to do. And I think if it is just an architectural design element, then the right thing to do is to ask them to come back with another design that doesn't impact their neighbors as greatly. But I do agree with Councillor Kroll that obviously the neighbors behind them have to be prepared for the fact that their view is going to be impacted, because their building height without a variance enables them to do that. So anyways, but I agree with the rest of council that we should send it back and ask for another design.
I would like to, in fairness to the proponent, who is in the audience, I understand, give them an opportunity to speak before we make a final decision, understanding where we are leaning at this point in time. But I think in fairness that they are here, that they have an opportunity to speak to us. So if Kirsten, if you can identify them and invite them to come forward.
Sorry, Mayor, I don't see, I'm as in my position in the meeting, I don't see the people who are
Okay.
in the audience.
All right. So who are we
But I
looking
would
for?
invite them to raise their hand if they're present for the
Okay.
attention of
I
the
have
corporate officer.
Cindy Mazzaro and Arno. Yeah, two people with raised hands right now. I'm assuming that that is them.
Yes.
They are the owner and the planner. So please bring those forward, staff. I see Arno there and Cindy there. Okay, you're still muted. Yep. Okay, you're unmuted. Okay. Did you want to share your screen, or you just want to speak?
It's Arno with the building company that is working with the
Okay.
homeowners.
Thank you.
I can just speak, I guess. I guess I had some clarification. So the carport, I'm just trying to clarify that doesn't have anything to do with the height of the main residence, right? Because the average height from grade would be considered different. Is that correct?
For a question to be answered by myself, yes, that has a different requirement from part 4 of the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's clear when people are talking about the carport being involved in this. I don't think it is part of this discussion. Secondly, you know, this is really a definition thing, like the definition of average grade. Like, I think if we pulled this house back a few feet, we would bring our average grade up substantially, and we would still cause major effects to the view corridor to that neighbor. And again, I'm just trying to understand. So the bylaw doesn't say anything about view corridors with regards to the height variance, and then this isn't in a protected zone as well. That's correct, right? Okay, just so my understanding. And then the last comment I had is, if we do move it up onto the bluff, and I think you guys have acknowledged this, or further back, it will completely remove the view for the house across the street. And so those are my main 3 points, I guess, is really this is a average grade semantics thing. You know, we could build grade up, we could cut out more at substantial cost to the homeowners to try and fix this issue. But that to me, I think, is where the issue lies. And then I guess one more thing, and maybe Cindy wants to comment on this. If we've got something from the neighbors in terms of, you know, that they can support the build of the current request, would that help in making a decision that would be favorable, I guess, to the homeowner?
It could certainly help us in our conversation if we go out there, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my comment, is that I'm not sure you guys are talking about across the road, but the two in Kirsten's presentation were beside the lot. So one on the south side and the other one, whatever direction that is, 308 Shoal Lookout. We actually lived in that house. And so we know the neighbors, and we've been full on board in communication with the neighbors about what our proposed plans are. 308 Shoal Lookout, I've actually shown them the plans. We would have had their support in writing, except one had surgery and they weren't here to actually go through the plans in detail. Their view is mainly out to the Shoal channel, so that our lot 47 is to the south of their view, but their main view is out the Shoal Lookout, which is almost in the opposite direction. And as I said, we've been speaking to the neighbors. We can get letters of support if that's what you are requesting. We chose also to build down and out closer to the setback as opposed to up on the bluff. As Arno said, that would cause considerably quite a bit of loss of view from the people across the road in the cul-de-sac. And there's really, I think, only one house actually that has any kind of view of that lot. I'm not sure what the address is of that house. It's the log cabin.
Yep. Now, is it possible? I mean, how would it impact you to bring the present siting of the house into conformance with height? How would it impact you?
I don't know. I mean, I guess we could lose, Arno, you might answer that better in terms of cost. What we were trying to do is dig down to see where we can find stable footings for the house. That's why the geotech has been involved. It's quite a steep slope, so it's a challenging build already. So Arno, I don't know, you might be able to answer that better if we were to lower the house. I don't know. Can we do that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we could look at lowering the house even further, but yeah, we would have to likely remove quite a bit more material out of there. You know, I guess another thing too is that we looked at the view from the deck, but I guess from the rest of the house, is it just from that one spot on the deck that the view is being compromised from that neighbor?
On 308, yeah,
my
308, they'll have partial view from the deck there, but like I said, the way the house is situated on the lot, it's facing out to more of the Shoal channel. That's the side of the house.
Yeah, and so it's almost like it's like it's exactly south almost from their deck that you'd have to look to get that view. Is that correct? So it's almost like the expectations is a 180-degree view from that house. I'm trying to understand what view we're actually affecting here.
Yes, because the view is out the front. They don't have the deck out the front where the living room is. That deck is off the side of the house.
Okay.
Kirsten, I believe you mentioned in your presentation that the owners had looked at a second alternative. Did we have that, or?
I don't have that as part of my presentation. I can bring it up, but essentially what it was, a house that was located 7.5 meter minimum front setback from Shoal Lookout. And the maximum height of that was at least 3 meters higher than what this current proposal is. So it would potentially block the views from across the street, as Cindy has said, yes.
Councillor Kroll and Councillor Ladwig.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And this would be to the property owner. What is the intent of the secondary suite?
We have aging parents. Both my partner and I's parents are still living in their late 80s. So we wanted to have a place that if something happened to one of them, the other one could live with us. So that was the primary intent. Also, we wanted to age in place. So we wanted to have a place where when we get older, if we need caretakers, that we could have a live-in suite. Not to be morbid, but that was part of the thought, that we could have care staying with us in our house, but in a separate suite if needed.
Thank you.
Councillor Ladwig.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. So the second option that was presented, would that require a variance, the one that blocks the views even more? So I'm just wondering, let's just say we didn't approve this today and you guys pulled your house back, that could be done without a variance and it would actually result in more view blockage than what is currently presented?
Sure, I can answer that. So that proposal was very, very vague. It wasn't as a fleshed out proposal as to what the intention would be. It would be quite a big departure from what is currently being proposed. It would have more an impact of the properties on the west side of Shoal Lookout across the cul-de-sac. It would actually largely remove any view impacts from 308 that I've brought up before. So I will bring that up if you would like.
I guess what I'm trying to, sorry, Councillor Lumley. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, Arnold mentioned that if he moved the building, that he could potentially do that, but then it would just create more of a view blockage. I'm trying to understand what that would be a rationale.
Yeah, so it's Arno. So my take is we would get to a point where I try to find the, again, definition of average grade, again, because we're on quite a slope here. And that's the issue that we're dealing with. If we had flat ground, we would build it and we would put it, right in that spot, and whatever views are there, if we were under the variance or underneath the height restriction, we would find a sweet spot and probably build it as close as we could to the 50 meter setback from the water. to make it so it's under, but we wouldn't be completely on the bluff. We would probably still be out a bit and still blocking some views. Again, the issue I'm coming up against is that, you know, we're gonna, again, the house to the north, that 308, we're blocking a view, it sounds like, that's 180 degrees to the south. Whereas if we put it on the bluff, we're completely blocking any view that the house across the street has at all. And so that's what I'm trying to understand is, you know, significantly impacting a neighbor, we're impacting a view corridor that is, you know, in a cul-de-sac that we're trying to keep. That I'm just trying to understand is like, is that really significant that we're blocking out a portion of their view when they have like basically 180 degrees existing?
Right. And the neighbors were all quite thankful that we were building lower and out towards a setback as opposed to building up higher on the rock, because as Arno stated, it is more of an imposing structure there.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to get at.
Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, I just find that the whole conversation irrelevant, because if it's this application is with a variance, if you can build a house without a variance, well, then you just would have went ahead and built it, and you live in the neighborhood, so you'll have to, if you block out, if everybody's in the shadow of your home after you build it, well, you have to live with those neighbors. I just don't understand. Like, if you can build a house without a variance, then we wouldn't be sitting here, I guess. But yeah, I would just say come back with something that does not require a variance, and either that or you don't have to come back at all. I'm not sure why we're banting around view protection without variances, because you can just build a house. Like, I'm kind of lost in this conversation, but I'm not. But
yeah, it's one that we're having more and more frequently, obviously, in that particular area. But trying to, and this is a much more of a significant, as Councillor Lumley mentions, 8 feet of a height variance that we don't normally see in terms of the overall height. So looking at the drawing, if that top piece of where the fireplace sticks out, the chimney sticks out of the top, if that wasn't there, the height variance would be significantly reduced. Is that a architectural element, or is it a living element? What is required on that? Arno?
Sorry, the chimney, as I understand it, has an exception.
Yeah, the chimney does, but the portion of the house that sticks up to that height, I don't know what that is. So it's got the smaller, forget what you call those windows in them, but the smaller, longer rectangular windows.
Windows.
Okay, yeah, and sorry, what was the question? Sorry, my apologies.
If that was, I'm looking at one of the elevations, that seems to be where the variance is primarily.
Sure.
Is that if that was not there, how would that affect the house itself?
Yeah, I mean, it would probably bring it down a couple of feet. I think we'd still be over height again. But I mean, again, if the house itself was built on flat, like the house itself is like from the bottom of the framing to the top of the house is not over height. Yeah. It's the definition of the post of where that's a not unusable space of what we're trying to, how to support the house itself.
Yeah, well, I think that, okay, I think, Councillor Ladman, go ahead.
Right, so the posts are being counted in the overall height of the building, which is why we're in this predicament in the first place. And it's,
yes, that's right. Correct. Yeah. The
overall height from grade at drive-in level would not be, if it wasn't for the grade of the lot, it would not be above the height restriction.
I believe so. Kirsten, is that how you see it as well?
I haven't specifically quantified to see if it would, based on the measurements I have before me. Average grade is calculated at the elevation of the ground at the corners of the building. And because those eastern sides do project so far above the ground on the structural supports, that it does mean that our average grade is quite a ways below the actual ground floor of the or bottom floor level of the lower floor. So if that average grade was at the floor, then it would either be meeting or be much closer to meeting than it is currently.
I would personally, having heard the conversation now, I would be curious to hear what the neighbors have to say.
Councillor Kroll?
You know, I think the architect and the property owner have heard our concerns. You know, my concern is that even if without the variance, they're going to block a view. Whether taking away that 2.8 meters is going to suddenly give someone a view, I somewhat doubt it. But I think, you know, we've raised our concerns. I think the neighbors really need to have their say in this, and I would move that it be put out for the neighbors' input. You know, in light of the fact that it isn't in a protected view corridor, you know, I would appreciate seeing, you know, actual views from the property of concern. I believe it's 308, with an 8-meter building put in that envelope and what it would do to their views. Because my gut feeling is either way they're going to lose, whether it's at the allowable height, in which case the builder and the architect wouldn't be here, as Councillor Lumley said. But yeah, so I would move the recommendations that staff have proposed.
Seconded. I'm still under a challenge with it because the legislation under the Local Government Act is very specific. It says, you see, we put now the onus on the neighbors to come forward and help us to stop it, as opposed to are requiring the owners to come back with a different plan. Because the legislation basically says that where council intends to issue a variance, it must then go to the neighbors. Kirsten?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to clarify a point from the Local Government Act.
Yes.
The Local Government Act does state that if council is prepared to make a resolution to approve the variance, it must notify.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't presuppose that notification means that you will approve it. You can make that, you can go for a notification even if it is, you're not prepared at this point to approve.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thanks for that clarification. Just, yeah. So, Councillor Kroll?
And just to reiterate, you know, my feeling is from the photograph that was shown of the view, I think if we were to see where an 8-meter house or a house that didn't require a variance situated on that site, what it would do to the view, I think either way, the view would be gone. So whether it's 8 feet above what's allowable or it's a building period, is suddenly going to obstruct that view. The carport can be built without the variance. And, you know, I think it's quite obvious how a building on that site across the street is going to impact.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have that information before us to look at that, so that to see that how that would affect. So, okay, I'm going to call the question, council, on the recommendations. All those in favor of the recommendations? Opposed? So at this point on local government on the charter, a tie vote is a negative vote. So, so at this point in time, to the owner, Cindy, the architect Arnold, this did not get approved. Doesn't mean you can't come back. It just means that this at this stage in time has not been approved to go forward.
Right. So what is required then to bring it back? What do you want to see?
I'll let you deal with Kirsten on that and
Okay.
and talk about that. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, our next on the agenda is the 3.2 from the Chief Administrative Officer, Hospice Services Funding. And this is a draft UBCM resolution from the town of Gibsons, and I'll ask the CAO to bring that forward.
Sorry, I adjusting my camera here. Thank you. Good afternoon. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So got a report about a proposed resolution for council to consider submitting to BCM. And this follows a visit that you received later last year from the Hospice Society related to presenting their report. We're also discussing options for funding. A follow-up resolution from there was that we contact local governments in BC and make them aware of the approach the council took around attributing a dollar amount per person as annual funding for the society and the work that they do on the coast. From the discussions that we were having around preparing that letter, the opportunity to prepare a resolution that spoke in greater depth about the situation with funding in BC in particular, created an opportunity to create this resolution. So what we brought back, and I want to acknowledge the folks from the Hospice Society that I see that there are a few on as our attendees, including Tess, the executive director, and Nancy, and I don't know if there are other folks there. So if council has questions, I would assume they'd be available to speak to that. And they did prepare this resolution, which you see in front of you. And it's our purpose today is to seek council's support and endorsement of this resolution. And if there's support, we would then submit that on your behalf to UBCM for consideration at the upcoming conference, which will be held later in September in Whistler. I don't know if you have any questions or if anyone from the Hospice Society wants to add any more to it. But,
yes, I'd invite anyone from the Hospice Society to raise their hands, and they'll be invited into the meeting. Not seeing anybody.
yeah, you did, Nick.
Okay, there we are. Okay, thank you. There you are. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council,
Yeah.
I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions. And
Could you identify yourself, please, for us?
sorry, I didn't realize I had not fixed my name. I'm Tess Huntley. I'm the executive director of the Sunshine Coast Hospital.
Thank you. Thank you. And you obviously have read this resolution and you support it. And any other comments about the society? And
at this time, yes, we support the resolution, and we're very appreciative again of the support from the town of Gibsons by recognizing hospice in your annual budget, and want to thank you again for that formally. I think this is a resolution that was co-drafted, and I think that Nancy Grenier, our manager communications and community partnerships, is also on this call and was part of drafting that resolution as well. We appreciate the support of Gibsons in looking to lead other municipalities across the province to support hospices in their area, as well as promote the province to take more of a role in the funding of hospices across the province. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions they'd like to direct.
I'll go to council now for questions. Councillor Kroll? I
noticed that Nancy Grenier does have her hand up in the attendees.
Oh, okay. Invite her to join us as well. Yeah.
But I really appreciate that Nancy and Tess and CAO Machado had worked collaboratively to get this resolution, and I would certainly move the recommendations.
Do we have it seconded by Councillor Lumley? Thank you. Nancy, did you want to add something? I know Councillor Lumley would like to speak to it, but I'll let you go first.
No, thank you, Your Worship. I have nothing to add at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lumley?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think back to the meeting when the Hospice Society first kind of, I guess opened our eyes to the fact that other provinces fund, but BC doesn't. And I'm trying to remember if we knew why, or if the province, I don't know what's the do you guys know the province's, I guess, reasoning or stance why they don't fund the Hospice Society, whereas a province like Ontario does? Do they have a reason, or I was just curious.
Not that I've been able to ascertain. I don't know if Nancy, you have a way of informing this, but I have not. I do not know what that rationale is for why we differ provincially on the funding of hospices. I can only assume it's a political stance.
This resolution, Your Worship, would be it's a great opportunity to have that dialogue and start this conversation going. So if there are any barriers or anything that we can help move forward for hospices across BC, this is the right time to do it.
Good, thank you. Councillor Crowell, you had something to add?
I'm not sure. It seems that from what I could sort of, in my own investigation, it seemed that in the province, the funding for hospice is left up to the various health units. And apparently there are, in northern BC, there are a couple of the health units that do support hospice. But the major health units where the bulk of the population are situate don't support hospice. So I don't know whether, for whatever reason, the provincial government hasn't decided to support it within the envelope or not. But as Nancy indicated, I think it's something that needs to be brought to the table and needs to be questioned, because we are seeing a greater need daily for the services that are provided by hospice. With the introduction of MAID, with the opioid crisis, with COVID, it's just going on. Mental health and suicide. So the need for hospice is there, and it needs to be properly funded if it's going to function. So I think I really applaud this, and I look forward to it being brought to the attention of more municipalities.
Thank you. With that being said, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. So that's approved. So Tess and Nancy, thank you for your participation. If you understand the process, this will go forward now to UBCM for debate at the conference held in September. So that will be highlighted at that time again. Councillor Crowell?
Because Ms. Huntley and Nancy are here, I just wanted to mention, because they probably won't be attending this evening's meeting when I do the report on the House Sound Forum, but I did mention at the House Sound Forum on Friday that we have embraced supporting hospice. We've asked the regional district and the district of Sechelt to support hospice. But the other regional districts and municipalities in the House on Forum group were certainly in support of the initiative. And actually, we were applauded for our initiative in taking this on. So it hasn't been in vain. We're gaining traction slowly.
Thank you, Councillor Crowell. That's wonderful to hear. Thank you all for your support.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Okay, that's the end of that portion of our meeting of the business. We'll now go to inquiries and ask if there's anybody in the audience who has any inquiries to make. please raise your hand, identify yourself to our staff. I'm not seeing anybody. No, I thank you all for attending, and the next meeting, the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole will be held on May 17 at 3 p.m. And ask council for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Lumley, all in favor of adjournment? Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Thank you.